Nothing screams 2007 than Final Fantasy Crisis Core. With a story that'll make any My Chemical Romance scene kid flutter with happiness, gameplay that sludges like mud, and narcissism that only Gact would love. I mean, who doesn't love Gact?
Nobody knows where the Genova cells are being kept. Not even Hojo knows. You'll never find it.
Then I shall willingly
put a whole bag of jelly beans up my ass.
Cloud!
Crisis Core is just one of those titles that you can't access if you do not have a PSP, and that's a huge shame. Then Square Enix announced Crisis Core Final Fantasy Reunion. You guys need better names, jeez. It's aimed to fix any kind of problems that Crisis Core has and improves accessibility to be played on all consoles, including the Nintendo Switch. So that's why we're going to compare the PSP version of Crisis Core to the new Reunion remaster, and to see if this is worth your hard-earned cash.
Well, I'm a country boy too. From where? Nibelheim. How about you?
So let's go into it. Why has Crisis Core aged? Why do you need to know about that? You might be a little razzle-dazzled by my opinions on Crisis Core, but the fact that remains, Crisis Core is a terribly aged game. And we're going to look at three aspects as to why. The graphics of Crisis Core are on the PSP, with a resolution of 480 by 272, which is basically double of the Nintendo DS. So yes, it's going to look phenomenal on your PSP, but as soon as you blow that up and as soon as you see this on component video, as you're seeing on the recording, it just doesn't look good. The game just looks horribly pixelated. It also gets pretty difficult to make out what is what in certain aspects of the game. And yes, you could use an emulator to kind of upscale the graphics, but even then, there's still going to be some discrepancies and you can still see the age of Crisis Core. This has unfortunately hit the beautiful FMVs that you see at the beginning intro when you're looking at Midgar or you're looking at some of the summons of Final Fantasy. They're pretty much at the same resolution as that PSP and they're horribly scaled down to that resolution. If you even try to upscale that or blow that up, it still looks pretty terrible. So that's another thing that unfortunately does need to be fixed. The menus also fit the PSP screen, but as soon as you blow those up, man, it's just a horrible experience to look at. Some text is barely legible, some icons are barely readable, and it's just a horrible mess. Like, this is a game that really does scream a remake because of this. Gameplay is also another mess. I do think that Crisis Core has pretty tight controls, at least for the system in context. How the battle system works is that you toggle L and R in order to select your commands, and then you press X in order to activate them, including attack. And while this is a little bit tedious, it does get the job done, and it actually gets pretty satisfying as things go. The problem is the whole roulette system. The roulette system on the top left is supposed to indicate Zack's personal feelings. When he gets pretty excited, the meter also reflects that. Now the problem is that the roulette system also stops mid-battle. So for example, you're fighting this enemy and the battle just completely stops, and it shows you an FMV as well as some of Zack's past, and then allows you to do a limit break, and then that limit break encapsulates and takes a bit of time as well. So you're about spending 1 to 2 minutes each time of the roulette to just look at these cutscenes, and it just completely destroys the flow of battle. You get really interested and really excited into this battle, and then it just completely stops. That was a huge problem, and it almost made me want to stop Crisis Core when I replayed it not too long ago. The story and the dialogue is just wow. The story is a little bit far-fetched. It definitely screams Tetsuya Nomura when it comes into how it's designed, but a lot of the interpersonal dialogue, let's say with Zack and Aerith, when you just really hear them speaking, it just feels like something that a 5-year-old actually made. It just doesn't really solidify interpersonal communication and more of a deeper level of communication between both characters. It kind of feels like just very random small talk that doesn't amount to anything, and I'll go into this a little bit later. So these are significant problems of Crisis Core, including accessibility, so playing this other than the PSP is a difficult experience. So how does this Reunion work. To TLDR, I think it's a pretty great remake. If you love the original Crisis Core, this is just a fantastic way to replay. It fixes almost all of the problems that I've had and even mentioned previously. While I do have some caveats and wishes that Square Enix would have updated this title a little bit more to reflect the Final Fantasy current canon, I do respect what they've done so far, and I think it is worth your time. Let's start with the graphics. How does that work? For context, I'm playing this on my PC. You can see all the specs right here, but I'm running it a full 60 FPS. You can run this up to a little bit higher, but it's nice to know that there are quite a bit of overhead that you can do if you'd like. At this moment in time, there is no ultra-wide support, so if you did want to get that, you probably have to look at a mod in the future. At least in this video, there isn't any, but it's something to note. I'll also put the spreadsheet right here. Square Enix officially showed this to see what the gameplay is going to be reflecting dependent on your hardware. And you know, on the lowest on the totem pole on the Switch, it looks like at 720p 30 FPS is still pretty respectable to be playing. So even if you are getting this on the Switch, I think you'll be having a pretty nice experience, and I think a lot of people will enjoy that, because even then, the original Crisis Core was about 30 FPS, so I still think it still reflects the original while not taking too much away. The Crisis Core remaster is a Yakuza Kiwami situation. What do I mean by that? The remaster uses the PSP version as a base. Everything is going to be surrounded and going to be confined using this template, for better or worse. You're going to be seeing very nice character models as well as environments, but also note that animations are going to be confined to whatever they were on the PSP. So the PSP didn't have too much range when it came into animation, and that's going to be reflective here. So if you're going to see interpersonal dialogue, like let's say between Angeal and Zack, you're going to be noticing some wonkiness and animations that are pretty stiff, reminiscent of the time. So don't expect anything of the quality of the remake that uses motion capture and that uses other incredible animators to make that and takes advantage of that hardware. But this basically takes advantage of the PSP hardware in terms of animation. Character models, I think, look pretty great. I don't think it's at the quality of the remakes, but I think in their own right, they do look very nice, and they are pretty closely reflective of that. Even if you have a high-end system, I don't think there's going to be much to make the models look better outside of modding. But if you want a really nice model, I think it looks great. A little side note, and this is more of a personal gripe, I'm not digging the way Zack's first model looks. There's something off about it for me, at least when you're kind of looking at it symmetrically. And I don't know, maybe you guys can tell me what's wrong with it. I'm not really good when it comes into facial anatomy, but you know, maybe you can tell me what's wrong with it or if I'm going crazy. There is some newer amounts of lighting, such as ambient occlusion and bloom, which does make the areas look so much better than the stark blue and green palette that was on the PSP. It does get really tiring to see that palette, so this gives so much more variety when you're looking at the sections of Midgar or going into Benora near Angeal's house and looking at the beautiful bloom that's kind of glistening down on Cloud and Sung when you're going through Benora. I thought it was a beautiful depiction of how the game looks, and it really does take advantage of newer lighting hardware. It doesn't use ray tracing or anything like that, but I think for what it's trying to do, I'm pretty satisfied. Now, I don't know if Square Enix still has the FMV source files for Crisis Core, but from my eyes, it does look like it's using AI upscaling, and you could see some sections right here during the intro. It does look a little bit off. So I really do think that they used AI upscaling. I don't know if it's as good as I'd like it to be, and not as good quality as I've seen some modders use on some other PC games, but I still think that it looks pretty respectable, and I think a lot of people won't really bat an eye. It's just, if you're more of a perfectionist and like to see higher quality FMVs, I think that's what's going to bring it to you. The audio is one of the bigger reworkings, and I think you need to know this. The English voice acting is completely reflective of the Final Fantasy remake voice acting. So all of the characters that reprise their role in that version are going to be in here as well. So if you're really used to the original Crisis Core voice acting, yeah, that's going to be a significant problem. I had a bit of a dissociative experience when I was looking at Zack's voice acting, because it's just not how I remembered it as a kid. So it's still really taking me out of it when I'm trying to look into that.
Making progress, Zack?
What's going on, Angeal? Why are we fighting Shinra troops?
They're Wutai troops in disguise. Now, head to the open area above.
Towards Sector 8.
Yes, But first, you have to clear a path.
Clear a path?
You'll see what I mean. Be careful.
So I can cut loose, right?
Use some discretion.
It's showtime.
Making progress, Zack?
Angeal, what's going on? Why are we fighting Shinra troops?
They're Wu-Tai troops in disguise. Now, head to the open area above.
You mean towards Sector 8?
Yes. But first, you're gonna have to clear a path.
Clear a path?
You'll see what I mean. Be careful.
So I can cut loose, right?
Within reason.
It's showtime.
So just know that some of the voice acting might not be up to par to your expectations because it is using the new canon, so take that with how you will. But knowing that voice acting, it is still very nice and it's very high quality. At least, you know, going back to 2007, which was another thing, but I'm digressing. Japanese voice acted has also been included, and this one is the exact same as the Crisis Core release back in the day. And the reason is because this canon of Crisis Core also uses the same voice acting as the remake. Square Enix used the exact same voice actors from the original Final Fantasy VII canon, and they reintroduced them into the remake and this remaster. So you're going to be seeing the exact same voice acting from every single character, and you're also going to be seeing expansions of some voice acting from some other characters like Zack and Kunsel, when that used to be read as text, but now that's voice acting. So I really do appreciate that. And hey, you can truly hear what Gak's voice is in Japanese, so that's a very cool bonus as well.
さまよい続ける心の水面にかすかなさざ波を立てて想像しいな子犬のザックス
The musical tracks have also been remastered as well. If you're used to hearing the original tracks, this might be something you might not like, and it actually took me quite out of the experience just because I am so used to hearing the original, but I do think the newer tracks have a nice job of remastering the original quality, so trying to bring that a little bit more up to spec. But it would have been at least a nice option to have the original soundtracks for those who are just diehard Crisis Core fans and want to hear those tracks. Having those options, I think, is a nice thing, and hopefully Square Enix, at least in an update, can do that. And at worst case scenario, if you're having this on Steam, you can at least find some kind of mod in the future that will transplant the original music into this. So options will come, just we'll give it time. Now, the gameplay is one of my favorite aspects of this. It feels exactly how it should. Thank you so much, Square, for fixing this. The combat and pacing is going to be pretty reminiscent to the remake in terms of speed and how it functions. So you only have one attack button that Zack can use his sword, which is reflective of the original. You have a dodge button that lets you dodge whatever you need to do. There's also a materia button that allows you to hotkey different materia as well as AP powers. So if you need to toggle a Dark Blizzard or a Faraga, you can do that no problem. So that was a really nice thing that you can actually toggle that instead of selecting it in the original. So it really does increase the flow of battle, and I thought that was a great experience when I was going through that. And the roulette system has been fixed, man. They actually streamlined this so much to the point where I barely even noticed that it exists, but it does affect battle how it did in the original. The roulette is going to be constantly rolling in the top left. You're going to be seeing it rotate whenever it needs to, and then when certain numbers meet its criteria, it's going to give you its effects. What's great too is that it does play the FMVs of the original version without taking up the full screen. They're going to be playing on your top left, so you might be a little bit distracted when you're seeing those FMVs play, but it's not going to take you out of the experience at all when battle, and that's a huge plus because you're still going to feel that flow of battle. And best part is, if you don't like any of the limit breaks, you don't have to use any of them at all. The game does tell you when to use them if you want to use them, but you don't have to. This is exactly what I wanted. Square Enix gave you options in order to play the roulette system in order to use these limit breaks, so you're never taken out of battle at all. You just go from one battle to another. But this can be a limitation. Like I said before, this game uses the framework of the PSP. For those who wanted an exact one-to-one experience, you'll be pretty content and happy that these areas are almost exactly like the original PSP experience. But if you're comparing that to the remake canon, this is where things get a little bit heavy. A lot of the areas do feel a bit barren and a bit closed off, and makes sense because it's using the confines of the PSP. Now, I'm not saying I expect Square Enix to expand these areas, but what I am saying is that if you're comparing this canon off from the original to this one, it's just going to come as a very empty game where you do hope that some areas were expanded a little bit more to kind of reflect that, but that would obviously cause more development time and that would kind of go off the scope of the remaster. So it's just something to note that the level designs are exactly how they were. So if you do love the original, that's a great thing. But if you're not a fan of that and you think that the confines are way too small, you're not gonna like that experience. So it's something to note as well. At least at this point in time, I found a weird controller bug that I wasn't a big fan of. I don't know why, but when I was playing on my Xbox One S controller connected to my PC via Bluetooth, I noticed that some of the materia started being used automatically whenever I pressed the face buttons. And in order to use materia, you have to toggle it with your triggers, and that was a problem that I had because I couldn't attack properly. And that's why in all the footage that you see here with the behemoth, I only exclusively use materia because that's what the game let me use. It wasn't until I found this user right here, he created this fix that allows you to map the controls exactly how they need to, so the game plays exactly how it should. So thank you to making that, man, and just want to give you credit for that. This is another problem that I have, that it still uses the same framework as the PSP, but like I said, considering that the Final Fantasy remake beautifully expands what Final Fantasy VII was, a lot of the character development and the character dialogue, and then coming back into something like this is just a really out-of-body experience for me. Just look at what I mean.
Not quite what I expected.
Really? I think it's fine. It's all about the flowers anyway.
I want a nicer one.
Stop being so picky.
A tiny little wish. That's all.
They're tiny, but you have lots, right?
That's right. Wanna hear?
How many you got?
23?
Write them down, so I don't forget.
クラウド、6番街のスラムのことを知ってる？
話さなかったか。故郷を出てそのまま神羅に入った。6番街どころかスラムはあまり知らない。
昔ミッドガルを作るため人大勢集まって、その人たち当てにして宿泊所、お店いっぱいできたの。
So you just get this really nonsensical small talk from some characters that don't really amount to anything. Well, at least in the remake, you do feel like whenever they spoke with each other, it was either banter that allowed them to, you know, grow closer as characters, and it just added something to the overall experience. This just feels like, you know, like children just made the dialogue, for lack of a better term, but I hope you know what I'm trying to get at. Even then, the base story is fine for what it is. It doesn't really do too much, and it feels very reminiscent to how Advent Children feels in terms of that story. But just know that the original experience is intact here. If you do like that story, hey, you know, all power to you. But I think having this amazing canon of the remake in comparison to the PSP truly shows how terrible a lot of the dialogue is. And I think it's worth noting that. Actually, it's always worth noting that. But those are my experiences with Crisis Core Final Fantasy Reunion. A terrible name, but a very nice remaster. I'm very appreciative that I was able to play this and give it a go, and it does feel like how it used to be, at least for me in 2007. This was my first Final Fantasy, so I am pretty fond of Crisis Core despite so many of its problems, but it's truly nice to see that so many people can play this on Steam, on other consoles, and, you know, experience what we used to experience back in 2007. But how are you going to be playing Crisis Core? Do you still prefer that PSP experience in those original 272p graphics, or maybe, you know what, 1080p and beyond is what's calling you? Let me know down in the comments below so we can have a nice discussion. Thank you guys so much for watching the video. I hope you do love this. And if you want to see other comparisons, I have them right here for you. And I also want to say thank you to the people who supported the channel. I really do appreciate it. And every time you do, it also helps, you know, get better equipment, get better stuff for the channel. So thank these guys right here. Thank you so much for watching. I do appreciate it. And I'll check you guys out very, very soon. またね。